There's a quiet truth. Few people ever acknowledge we live in a culture that glorifies effort, hustle, and the relentless pursuit of attention. Every day we are taught that the harder we push, the faster the world will bend to our will. Yet paradoxically, the more you try to force things, the more they resist. The harder you chase, the further they seem to drift away. This is the paradox of trying less to attract more, a principle that challenges everything we think we know about effort, desire, and influence. Imagine a crowded room. People are talking, competing for attention, leaning forward, projecting confidence. And then, in the corner, someone stands quietly. They speak softly, move deliberately, and appear unaffected by the chaos around them. Strangely, the crowd leans toward them. People notice, people listen. But people want to be near them, not because they shouted louder, but because they stopped shouting entirely. This is the essence of the paradox. Less force, more presence, less pursuit, more attraction. It begins with understanding a subtle law of human perception. Intensity often repels while calmness draws. When we try too hard, our energy communicates tension, our urgency signals scarcity, and scarcity paradoxically pushes others away. People are not merely attracted to achievements or charisma, they are drawn to emotional stability, to individuals who can hold their center without flinching at every stimulus. In essence, trying less is not about laziness, it's about cultivating an inner gravity that naturally pulls people, opportunities, and experiences toward you. Consider the way water behaves. Pour it forcefully onto rocks, and it splashes away. Let it flow naturally, and it carves valleys, nurtures life, and shapes landscapes. Human interaction, desire, and influence follow a similar rhythm. Effort that is desperate, urgent, or anxious often splashes away. Effort that is deliberate, measured, and mindful tends to attract and mold its environment without strain. This paradox also exposes a hidden tension in how we approach growth. Most of us have been taught to chase visibility, results, or validation. We are told that success demands constant motion, unyielding effort, and visible ambition. Yet the deeper truth is that certain forms of influence and fulfillment emerge only when effort is tempered by restraint, when desire is aligned with presence rather than force. One of the strongest magnetism is rarely produced by pressing outward. It is generated from mastery inward. There is a psychological dimension to this that cannot be ignored. Trying too hard signals a lack of internal security. People subconsciously perceive it as imbalance or neediness. Conversely, a calm, grounded presence communicates confidence, autonomy, and self-sufficiency. When you reduce your compulsive striving, you create space. Space for others to approach, space for ideas to emerge, space for influence to manifest naturally. The paradox can feel counterintuitive. At first, you may ask yourself, if I stop pushing, won't nothing happen? If I step back, won't I be invisible? The answer is not a promise, but a probability. Reducing forceful effort increases the likelihood that attention, connection, and alignment will gravitate toward you organically. It shifts the energy from chasing to allowing, from imposing to attracting. This is not a call to inaction or passivity, far from it. The principle of trying less is deeply active, but it is active with intelligence and precision rather than frantic effort. It requires clarity about your values, confidence in your own presence, and discipline in how you deploy your energy. It's the difference between flailing in search of impact and moving with calibrated intention. You will notice when you experiment with this subtle shifts. Conversations become more fluid. Opportunities seem to appear without direct pursuit. Relationships deepen without coercion. Even personal performance, work, creativity, expression improves, not because you forced it, but because you allowed your natural capability to unfold without unnecessary strain. The paradox is also deeply liberating. When you release the compulsion to control outcomes, the mind experiences relief. Anxiety diminishes, presence sharpens. Your influence grows, not because you are louder, faster, or more forceful, but because you have created an internal center that others instinctively recognize and respect. You are no longer reacting to every stimulus. You are responding with discernment. Here is a crucial insight. The world is already moving. People are already seeking, desiring, exploring. Your role is not to chase every signal, but to position yourself in a state of readiness, aligned with your own clarity and calm. Trying less does not mean doing nothing. It means doing what is essential, removing what is unnecessary, and letting natural attraction operate within the space you create. Consider the metaphor of a magnet. A magnet does not push, it simply holds its polarity. Objects, in proximity if compatible, will be drawn naturally. Your presence can function the same way. When your energy is grounded, steady, and intentional, it exerts influence without overt effort. You begin to understand that attraction is less about proving worth and more about cultivating equilibrium between confidence and humility, action and patience, desire and restraint. This audiobook will guide you through that paradox, exploring why effort sometimes backfires, how to cultivate presence that draws rather than pushes, and the practical shifts you can make in thought, emotion, and behavior. It will challenge conventional beliefs about success, influence, and human connection, offering a framework that is both psychologically sound and universally applicable. By the end, you will recognize that trying less is not a weakness, it is a refined strength. It is a disciplined mastery of your inner state that communicates power, integrity, and allure, far more effectively than frantic striving ever could. The paradox is not a trick nor a gimmick. It is a principle, grounded in human psychology, behavioral patterns, and the subtle dynamics of influence that operate beneath conscious awareness. So if you have ever felt exhausted by effort, frustrated by unreciprocated attention, or trapped by the relentless need to chase, this audiobook offers a new lens. Here, you will learn that stepping back is not stepping down, that releasing tension can increase impact, that the art of attracting more often begins with the discipline of trying less. And as you begin to understand this paradox, you will notice the first quiet transformations. The tension in your interaction softens, your focus sharpens, people, opportunities, and experiences begin to align with your presence rather than your insistence. You start to operate from a place of magnetism rather than momentum, a place where influence is earned without coercion, attention is drawn without desperation, and your life begins to respond to the strength of your calm rather than the intensity of your push. This is the threshold, the place where less becomes more, where restraint produces results, where inner gravity replaces external force. And it begins with a simple decision to observe, to pause, to reduce the compulsive striving that has dictated so much of your energy. To recognize that in the quiet, in the calm, in the stillness of measured presence, the paradox reveals itself. The less you push, the more you are noticed. The less you demand, the more you attract. The less you force, the more flows. And that is where the journey starts. Understanding the subtle mechanics of effort and attraction. At the core of human experience lies a contradiction. We are taught, from early life, that effort equals outcome. Study harder, work longer, push more, achieve faster. And yet, time and again, we encounter situations where intensity does not translate into results, where chasing yields exhaustion, frustration, and distance rather than connection. The key to the paradox of trying less to attract more begins. Here, the world does not respond solely to effort. It responds to the energy behind the effort. When you observe interactions, whether in personal relationships, professional contexts, or creative endeavors, you notice patterns. Individuals who push too hard often encounter resistance. Their energy signals urgency, tension, or need. There is a subtle, almost imperceptible cue that alerts others. This person is striving for something they do not fully hold internally. In contrast, individuals who operate from a grounded center convey a calm certainty. They do not chase, they allow. And in that allowance, attraction emerges. Psychologically, this phenomenon is rooted in how humans perceive stability and security. The brain, evolved to detect threats and scarcity, is naturally drawn to those who demonstrate internal equilibrium. When someone's presence is steady, measured, and emotionally self-contained, it signals competence, reliability, and resilience. Effort, without balance, may communicate the opposite: instability, volatility, or need. This is not manipulation, it is simple perception. People respond to the emotional signals you emit, often before they consciously process your words or actions. Let's consider an example. Imagine a conversation at a networking event. One person is desperate to impress. They interrupt, over-explain, and constantly seek acknowledgement. Another stands quietly, listens intently, and responds with clarity. The first person is noticeable, but the attention they receive is often superficial or fleeting. The second person may initially seem reserved, but others gravitate toward them. Naturally, their calm signals confidence and authority, and it subtly draws engagement. The paradox is clear. Trying harder does not equate to stronger attraction. Calm presence does. This principle extends far beyond social interactions. In professional settings, individuals who micromanage or overexert themselves often encounter friction. Their intention may be to influence, lead, or achieve, but the intensity creates pressure, and pressure tends to repel rather than attract. Those who act with deliberate restraint, however, often inspire cooperation and alignment. Their energy communicates mastery rather than desperation. They invite participation instead of imposing it, the less force. Applied, the more alignment occurs naturally. From a behavioral perspective, trying less requires mastery of internal states. It demands self-awareness, the ability to recognize when effort is productive and when it becomes counterproductive. It requires emotional regulation, the capacity to remain composed in situations that provoke anxiety or urgency. And it requires clarity of intention, knowing what matters most and directing energy accordingly. Without these elements, trying less may appear passive or disengaged. With them, it becomes a refined form of influence, a subtle yet powerful magnetism. This is also where the principle of strategic patience comes into play. When we try too hard, we often act out of impatience. Reacting to external pressures or imagined scarcity, we seek immediate validation, instant results, and rapid feedback. But attraction and influence frequently operate on a slower rhythm. They respond to consistency, presence, and depth. By reducing compulsive striving, we align ourselves with this natural cadence. We stop pushing against time and circumstances, and we begin to flow with them. Practical application. of this concept starts with observing your energy. Ask yourself, when I am trying hardest, what am I communicating non-verbally? Am I radiating tension, need, or desperation? Or am I exuding calm, clarity, and confidence? This is not a superficial exercise, it is an exploration of how your inner state directly shapes external outcomes. Your presence is a form of communication, often more persuasive than your words or actions. Another layer involves choice. Trying less does not mean abandoning action or ambition. It means selectively engaging in efforts that align with your values and strengths, while releasing unnecessary exertion. It is about prioritizing quality over quantity, intention over compulsion. The most magnetic individuals do not scatter energy indiscriminately. They invest where it matters, conserving their presence for maximum effect. Consider creativity, for instance. Artists, writers, and performers often experience periods where effort alone cannot produce results. Forcing inspiration can create stagnation. Yet when they step back, allow themselves to observe, and reduce the intensity of pursuit, ideas tend to emerge naturally. The same principle applies to influence, relationships, and professional impact. The less frantic the effort, the more authentic and compelling the outcome. This section also demands a reframing of common beliefs. Most of us equate effort with control. We think, if I push harder, I can make people, circumstances, or outcomes bend to my will. The paradox challenges this. Trying less does not mean giving up control. It means shifting the locus of control inward. You focus on mastering your presence, regulating your energy, and aligning your actions with purpose. Influence and attraction then emerge as natural consequences rather than forced products. Here, subtle repetition is crucial. Notice the recurring themes: calm presence over frantic effort, selective action over indiscriminate striving, internal mastery over external compulsion. Each layer reinforces the idea that attraction is less about pushing outward and more about cultivating inward equilibrium. The quieter you are in your striving, the louder your presence becomes. Even small shifts can produce noticeable effects. Reducing the frequency of unnecessary messages, tempering over-eagerness in interactions, or pausing before reacting in tense situations all signal emotional regulation. These actions, while minor individually, accumulate into a form of magnetic steadiness. People do not consciously recognize why they are drawn to you. They only notice the subtle energy of composure. It's important to acknowledge that this principle is probabilistic, not deterministic. Trying less does not automatically yield universal attraction or instant results. It increases the likelihood of alignment, attention, and engagement, but outcomes remain influenced by context, compatibility, and timing. The ethical nuance is clear. This is not a manipulation tactic, but a strategy for aligning effort with presence. It respects others' autonomy while optimizing the influence of your own energy. Finally, the paradox teaches a lesson about identity. In trying less, you are not diminishing yourself. You are refining the version of yourself that is most resonant with others. You are moving from reactive effort to deliberate presence, from compulsion to intention, from external validation to internal mastery. And in that refinement, a form of authentic attraction emerges, one that is sustainable, resilient, and deeply human. As we move forward, in this audiobook, we will explore practical strategies to integrate this principle into daily life. We will examine how to balance effort with allowance, how to cultivate presence that attracts, and how to navigate the tension between desire and restraint. How we will uncover why reducing striving is not a concession, but a calculated refinement of personal influence. And you will begin to see that trying less is not a shortcut. It is a disciplined, psychologically informed approach to achieving more. Without force, without desperation, and without compromise of integrity. By the end of this section, the first layer of understanding is clear. The energy behind your effort matters more than the effort itself. The way you carry yourself, regulate your internal state, and selectively engage determines how naturally attraction unfolds around you. Less does not mean weaker. It often means more focused, more resilient, and more compelling. And that is the first step in mastering the paradox of trying less to attract more. The inner dynamics of presence and non-striving, or to truly grasp why trying less often yields more, we need to examine what is happening beneath the surface. Most people operate under an unexamined assumption that effort alone determines outcomes. We chase, push, and control, believing this guarantees influence or attraction. Yet human interaction, opportunity, and alignment function on more subtle wavelengths. Effort is only one variable. Energy, presence, and intentionality are often far more consequential. Consider presence. Presence is the quality of being fully grounded, in the moment, fully aware, and unshaken by external chaos. It is not simply being physically there, it is the integration of mind, body, and emotional state in a way that communicates stability without force. Presence draws attention because it signals mastery. People sense, often unconsciously, whether someone is operating from a place of internal equilibrium or from reactive tension. Those operating from equilibrium exude a quiet magnetism. Those operating from tension broadcast need, urgency, or imbalance. Psychologically, presence functions as an anchor. When you reduce unnecessary striving, your energy becomes less scattered and your intentions are clearer. This allows others to engage with you on terms that feel organic rather than coerced. The paradox is subtle. The less you impose, the more receptive the environment becomes to your influence. People are not tricked into attraction. They naturally gravitate toward the composure and confidence you project. Non-striving is not passivity. It is deliberate restraint. It requires discernment, knowing when action amplifies value and when action adds noise. In practical terms, this might look like listening more in conversations rather than immediately responding to impress, pausing before sending messages, instead of reacting impulsively, or focusing on key priorities rather than spreading effort. Thin across multiple fronts, non-striving channels energy efficiently and communicates self-possession. There is also a neuropsychological basis to this dynamic. When someone exhibits over-eagerness or desperation, it activates subtle cognitive cues in observers' brains associated with scarcity and neediness. These cues can provoke resistance or reduced receptivity. Conversely, calmness, measured action, and emotional regulation signal security and competence, activating positive engagement responses in others. This does not guarantee attraction or influence, but it makes alignment more likely. Must we also see the paradox play out in timing? Trying too hard often compresses natural rhythms, creating misalignment. Opportunities that might have unfolded with patience are pushed into premature action. Relationships that could deepen naturally are accelerated unnaturally, creating tension or friction. By trying less, you respect natural timing. You create space for interactions, decisions, and outcomes to emerge organically. You reduce the friction that arises from forcing events to conform to a rigid schedule or expectation. A practical example can illustrate this. Imagine a professional negotiation. One party pushes aggressively, bombarding the other with data, arguments, and appeals. Another remains composed, listens, and responds with precision. While the first appears active, their energy may inadvertently signal insecurity or overcompensation. The second appears less active, yet their calm invites engagement, trust, and collaboration. The paradox becomes clear: intensity without presence can repel, while measured presence often attracts. This principle is mirrored in creative work as well. Artists who obsessively chase inspiration often experience burnout and creative blocks. Those who step back reduce, forcing effort, and allow themselves mental space often find ideas emerge naturally, sometimes more innovative than what they could have produced through sheer striving. The paradox is universal. The energy behind action is as influential, if not more so, than the action itself. Another critical element is self-perception. The act of trying less does not mean devaluing oneself. It is about cultivating a belief in your own capability and sufficiency. When you operate from a mindset of adequacy, you no longer seek validation or results as proof of worth. This internal security radiates outward, creating an aura of attraction and credibility. People are naturally drawn to those who operate from self-assuredness rather than neediness. We must also address social dynamics. In groups, whether at work, social gatherings, or online communities, over-exertion often signals a desire to dominate or control, even if unintended. Non-striving, in contrast, conveys confidence and invites voluntary engagement. It allows interactions to unfold on shared terms rather than imposed ones. Others feel freer to participate, and as a result, relationships deepen with less overt effort. The ethical dimension is equally significant. Trying less should not be confused with manipulation or strategic withholding. The intent is not to engineer outcomes or exploit psychology. Instead, it is about understanding the natural tendencies of human perception and interaction and aligning one's behavior with ethical influence. By mastering your energy, you respect the autonomy of others while optimizing the effectiveness of your presence. This requires discipline. Non-striving does not emerge spontaneously for most people. It is cultivated through awareness, practice, and reflection. Techniques might include mindful pauses before responding. In high-stakes situations, intentional reduction of reactive communication, or focusing on deep listening rather than immediate contribution. Over time, these habits rewire behavior, making non-striving a default mode rather than a conscious effort. There is a subtle but powerful feedback loop at play. As you reduce compulsion, your experiences often begin to confirm the principle. You notice more alignment, engagement, and resonance. These experiences reinforce confidence in your approach, which further stabilizes your internal state. This cyclical reinforcement accelerates mastery of the paradox. The less you push, the more naturally influence unfolds. It is also worth noting the emotional dimension. Trying too hard generates tension, stress, and a sense of urgency. Non-striving fosters calm, clarity, and emotional stability. This internal state not only attracts others, but also enhances your own capacity to think strategically, respond creatively, and engage meaningfully. Now, calmness becomes both a tool of influence and a source of personal resilience. Subtle repetition solidifies understanding. The key elements recur: energy behind effort matters more than effort itself. Presence amplifies attraction. Non-striving enhances alignment. Internal mastery precedes external influence. These concepts are interconnected. Mastery of one reinforces the others. The cumulative effect is a form of influence that feels effortless, yet is deeply grounded, ethical, and sustainable. Finally, consider the long-term implications. Over a lifetime, individuals who operate from measured presence rather than compulsive striving tend to experience more coherent relationships, more meaningful professional impact, and more sustainable personal growth. The paradox is not a shortcut for immediate gain. It is a long-term strategy for optimizing alignment, influence, and fulfillment without sacrificing integrity or composure. As we progress into the next section, we will explore practical strategies for translating these insights into daily practice. We will examine how to balance effort with allowance, how to cultivate non-striving in high-pressure environments, and how to create conditions where attraction and alignment emerge naturally. We will also look at common pitfalls and misconceptions that can undermine mastery of this principle. By the end, you will begin to see that trying less is not a concession or retreat. It is an advanced form of presence, intention, and ethical influence. Integrating the principle from awareness to practice, understanding the paradox of trying less to attract more is only the beginning. Knowledge without integration remains theoretical. To truly benefit, you must translate awareness into habitual practice, creating a feedback loop where presence, restraint, and intention reinforce each other. This is where theory becomes lived experience, where subtle shifts in behavior yield noticeable changes in influence, connection, and alignment. The first step is observing your habitual effort patterns. Most people do not realize how often their energy communicates urgency, need, or compulsion. Do you over-communicate in conversations, sending multiple messages before receiving a response? Do you over-prepare, over-explain, or over-exert in pursuit of recognition? These tendencies, while often motivated by positive intentions, and inadvertently signal instability. The paradox requires you to notice these patterns without judgment, to see where less effort could produce more impact. Once awareness emerges, the second step is calibration. Calibrating effort involves discernment, knowing when to act, when to pause, and when to step back entirely. It is not about inaction, it is about precision. Imagine the difference between a flood of water and a steady, controlled stream. One overwhelms and splashes, while the other nourishes and shapes. Your actions function the same way. Calibrated effort communicates competence, focus, and reliability. Overexertion communicates need. Less, when applied wisely, often yields deeper resonance. The third step is presence training. Presence is the silent yet powerful language of influence. It is cultivated through practices that stabilize attention, regulate emotion, and anchor awareness. Techniques may include mindful breathing, reflective pauses before responding, and deliberate observation of surroundings. Presence is not performative, it is authentic. It is the internal state that others detect. Instinctively, often before a word is spoken. Integration also requires emotional regulation. The paradox of trying less is most difficult when emotions are heightened. Anxiety, fear, or impatience drive. Compulsion. Learning to regulate these internal states is essential. Emotional regulation does not suppress feeling. It channels energy in ways that maintain composure and clarity. For example, pausing before replying to a triggering message allows space for reasoned response rather than reactionary over-effort. Over time, and this stabilizes energy, enhancing attraction and alignment naturally. We must also consider the dynamics of social reciprocity. Trying less can paradoxically create conditions where others are more willing to invest attention, effort, or collaboration. When you reduce the pressure you place on interactions, you invite voluntary engagement. people naturally respond to space, freedom, and authenticity. When effort is measured, intentional, and calm, it encourages mutual contribution rather than unilateral pushing. A critical insight is that attraction is rarely linear. Trying less does not guarantee immediate results, but it increases the probability of sustained, authentic connection. The principle operates across multiple domains: personal relationships, professional influence, creativity, and personal growth. In each case, less frantic. Effort allows natural forces, timing, resonance, curiosity, and compatibility to operate with greater efficiency. This is not manipulation, it is alignment. You are reducing friction while amplifying authenticity. Practical exercises can accelerate mastery. Begin with communication. In conversations, prioritize listening over speaking, observe the rhythm of exchange, and resist the urge to fill silence prematurely. Note the difference in how others respond to measured participation versus compulsive contribution. In professional contexts, focus on high-impact tasks, limit reactive work, and create deliberate pauses in projects or negotiations. Observe how clarity, calm, and precision attract collaboration more effectively than continuous pushing. Another avenue for practice is selective visibility. In social or professional networks, reduce compulsive posting, over-engagement, or excessive updates. Instead, contribute meaningfully with focus and purpose. The absence of constant output increases the perceived value of your contributions. This is the paradox in action. Presence becomes more magnetic when effort is restrained and attention is drawn without force. Self-perception is equally important. Mastery of this principle requires cultivating internal sufficiency. When you are confident in your own value, you do not chase external validation. This internal grounding communicates security, independence, and stability. People are drawn to those who project this sense of sufficiency often more than to those who overperform in visible ways. Trying less becomes a reflection of mastery, not disengagement, but it is also valuable to integrate reflection. After interactions, ask, where did my energy communicate compulsion? Where did I allow presence and measured action? How did others respond to restraint versus overexertion? Over time, this reflective practice sharpens self-awareness and reinforces the habit of non-striving. Each observation informs the next iteration of action, creating an adaptive loop that strengthens both presence and influence. Timing and rhythm remain central. Trying less requires patience, not passivity. Observe the natural flow of interactions, opportunities, and creativity. Align action with moments that amplify resonance, rather than forcing outcomes to fit your schedule. This patience is not passive waiting, it is active alignment with the unfolding dynamics of environment, circumstance, and human behavior. Psychologically, the shift from compulsive effort to calibrated presence transforms identity. You begin to internalize a sense of agency rooted in self-mastery rather than external validation. This identity shift is subtle but profound. Influence becomes a byproduct of composure. Attention becomes a reflection of presence, and attraction emerges from alignment rather than imposition. You are no longer a reactive agent of circumstance, you are a deliberate cultivator of energy and opportunity. Integration also requires consistency. One-off attempts at non-striving produce limited effects. Sustained practice embeds the principle into habitual behavior. Over time, interactions, opportunities, and relationships increasingly align with the energy you project, creating a compounding effect, just as overexertion erodes attraction. Gradually, A measured presence builds it steadily. Finally, ethical mindfulness underpins every action. Trying less must be guided by integrity, respect, and mutual benefit. The goal is not to manipulate perception, but to optimize alignment and influence through self-mastery. Ethical application ensures that attraction and engagement occur naturally, respecting autonomy while enhancing connection. It transforms the paradox from a tactical approach into a principle of principled influence. As we move to the next section, we will explore deeper psychological mechanisms that explain why trying less produces more attraction. We will dissect attention dynamics, social resonance, and cognitive biases that amplify the effect of presence over force. By understanding the underlying mechanisms, you gain not just practical skill, but also insight into why this principle reliably operates across diverse contexts. The psychology behind attraction, why less often wins. Attraction is not merely a matter of appearance, achievement, or even charm. It is fundamentally an emergent property of energy, presence, and the subtle cues that signal emotional stability. The paradox of trying less to attract more works, because human perception is wired to respond to internal equilibrium, not external intensity. Understanding this is key to mastering the principle. Cognitive science teaches us that human attention is limited and selective. People unconsciously prioritize stimuli that are emotionally stable, predictable in quality, and inherently interesting. Excessive effort, over-communication, or hyperactivity often overloads perception, triggering subconscious resistance. When someone pushes relentlessly, the brain perceives imbalance or anxiety, which decreases receptivity. In contrast, measured presence, calm, intentional, and unforced, aligns with the brain's preference for stability and pattern, naturally drawing attention and engagement. From a behavioral standpoint, trying less signals autonomy. When a person reduces compulsive striving, they communicate self-sufficiency, which in turn signals value. This does not rely on performance alone. It relies on the subtle transmission of emotional security. The effect is amplified because humans are attuned to scarcity and need. Desperation can feel draining, whereas calm competence invites curiosity, respect, and voluntary engagement. The paradox becomes evident. Restraint generates perceived value, while overexertion diminishes it. Mirror neurons further explain why presence matters. These neurons fire when observing others' emotions and actions, creating subconscious resonance. When someone operates from a state of calm, focus, and measured intention, observers mirror. Neurons respond with a subtle alignment, generating trust and receptivity. Conversely, anxious or hyperactive energy can trigger mirrored tension, reducing attraction. The less you push, the more your internal state can be mirrored positively in others, producing influence without explicit effort. Social psychology also provides insight. Studies on scarcity, effort, and attention reveal that overexposure reduces perceived value. When people are too available, too eager, or excessively communicative, they paradoxically become less magnetic. Strategic restraint, on the other hand, creates psychological space. People begin to notice, value, and seek out engagement. Because the interaction feels earned rather than imposed, less becomes more. Because scarcity of effort when paired with presence communicates intentionality rather than absence. Another factor is the role of anticipation. Human attention is drawn to what is uncertain, yet safe, intriguing, yet approachable. Trying less allows space for curiosity and anticipation to build. When every action is forced, the element of discovery vanishes. Reducing compulsive effort preserves intrigue. It creates a subtle tension. People are drawn to learn, engage, and explore, not because they are coerced, but because the environment allows it naturally. There is a neurochemical component as well. Now, observers release dopamine and other reward-related chemicals when they experience interactions that are neither overbearing nor predictable. Calm, measured presence triggers these subtle reward loops. Overexertion can disrupt them, creating fatigue or disengagement. The principle of trying less is not merely social, it aligns with how human brains respond to energy patterns, timing, and subtle signaling. Let's consider professional dynamics. Leaders who micromanage or push aggressively often encounter compliance, but rarely genuine engagement. Teams respond with effort, not alignment. Leaders who operate from calm authority communicate expectations with clarity and allow space for initiative, often find engagement, creativity, and alignment increase. Influence emerges naturally from presence, not pressure. The paradox is evident. Influence without over-effort tends to produce more sustainable results. In relationships, the principle operates similarly. Over-trying in social, romantic, or familial interaction signals insecurity. Subtle restraint, reducing the compulsion. To seek validation, attention, or affirmation signals self-possession and emotional stability. People naturally gravitate toward those who maintain internal equilibrium. Attraction is not about proving worth, it is about embodying it. Trying less creates the conditions for mutual interest and deeper connection to flourish. A key psychological insight is that less effort enhances focus and intentionality. When effort is unrestrained, it becomes scattered, diluted, and less impactful. Calibrated energy, in contrast, communicates purpose and competence. Every interaction, message, or action carries more weight because it is intentional rather than reactive. The paradox operates not in reducing value, but in amplifying the perceived significance of each action by aligning it with presence and restraint. Moreover, the principle is iterative. Each interaction where effort is tempered reinforces internal confidence and improves future engagement. You learn to read cues, regulate energy, and deploy presence strategically without force. Over time, these habits compound, producing a persistent, subtle magnetism. Attraction is no longer dependent on superficial activity. It emerges from the consistent alignment of internal state, intention, and measured action. Even in creative endeavors, trying less improves results. Overexertion often produces output that is rushed, anxious, or formulaic, and by allowing space for insight, reflection, and natural emergence, quality improves. Observers, whether audiences, collaborators, or critics, respond positively to this refined energy. The less frantic the creation process, the more authentic and compelling the output becomes. Finally, the principle teaches emotional resilience. By decoupling effort from immediate results, you reduce frustration and maintain composure under pressure. Internal stability becomes the default, not the outcome of external validation. This shift in mindset ensures that attraction, influence, and engagement are less dependent on reactive striving and more on the consistent cultivation of presence and internal mastery. Subtle repetition reinforces the key takeaway. Attention is drawn to stability over intensity, presence over force, restraint over compulsion. The less you push, the more your internal state communicates value. The less you impose, the more natural alignment occurs, and the less you force, the more authentic attraction emerges. As we move into the next section, we will examine the practical daily life application of these psychological insights. We'll explore routines, interactions, and behaviors designed to embody the paradox consistently. You will learn how to integrate presence, strategic restraint, and emotional calibration into every aspect of life, producing influence and attraction without exhaustion or overexertion. Embodying the paradox, practical application in daily life. Understanding the psychology and theory behind trying less is one thing. Translating it into action, into lived experience, is where transformation occurs. And this section focuses on practical strategies to integrate presence, restraint, and intentional energy into everyday life so that influence, attraction, and alignment emerge naturally. The first domain to address is communication. In conversations, the tendency to over-explain, over-justify, or over-engage often dilutes impact. Practicing measured responses, pausing before replying, listening attentively, and choosing words deliberately enhances presence. Silence is a tool, not a void. It communicates. Confidence allows others space to contribute and often encourages deeper engagement than constant verbal input. When less is said, the weight of your words increases and attention naturally follows. Digital communication offers another arena for practice. Many people over-message, over-like, taunt or compulsively post to maintain visibility or validation. Reducing compulsive engagement creates subtle scarcity, but in a controlled, ethical way. By contributing selectively with thought and purpose, you increase the perceived value of each interaction. The paradox reveals itself again. Stepping back strategically draws more attention than constant pursuit. Professional application requires similar calibration. High performers often equate busyness with productivity, visible effort, with competence, yet influence grows, not from endless activity but from strategic focus. Prioritize high-impact tasks, communicate with clarity, and resist reacting to every minor demand. Allow others to approach, initiate, and align with your presence rather than overwhelming them with activity. Measured action conveys authority without force, of making collaboration more fluid and influence more sustainable. In creative or intellectual work, the principle is equally relevant. Trying less does not mean sacrificing output. It means aligning effort with natural flow. Allow space for ideas to emerge, for observation and reflection, to inform action. For writers, this might be stepping away from a project to incubate insight. For designers, it could be deliberate pauses in the creative process to refine perspective. The paradox, reduced compulsion, often leads to higher quality outcomes and greater resonance with audiences. Social dynamics also benefit from conscious application. Over-eagerness, constant availability, and anxious pursuit often repel rather than attract. In contrast, practicing selective presence, showing up intentionally, engaging with authenticity, and avoiding unnecessary pursuit signals stability and autonomy. People are naturally drawn to individuals who operate from internal sufficiency, who are composed, and who do not demand attention. Trying less creates space for voluntary connection, respect, and mutual interest. Daily habits support the principle of non-striving. Mindful routines such as deliberate breathing, short meditation, or reflective journaling stabilize energy and reinforce composure. Pausing before responding to external stimuli, whether messages, requests, or pressures, cultivates measured action. Each pause is an opportunity to align internal state with intention, ensuring that effort is purposeful rather than reactive. Over time, these practices embed non-striving as a default behavior rather than a conscious effort. Boundaries are a critical practical tool. And by defining what you will engage with and what you will not, you create internal clarity that communicates value and intentionality. Boundaries do not repel. They clarify energy and preserve presence. When people interact with someone who maintains healthy limits, they experience clarity, respect, and trust, which amplifies natural attraction. Trying less does not equate to disengagement. It equates to selective, purposeful engagement. Another practical approach is observation. Watch the dynamics around you. Notice how people respond to compulsive effort versus measured presence. Notice your own reactions. Where do you feel compelled to push? Where can restraint produce better outcomes? Observation is not judgment, it is feedback. Each interaction becomes a lesson in energy management, presence, cultivation, and alignment optimization. The integration also extends to self-perception. Internal sufficiency, believing that your value is inherent rather than earned through constant striving, is fundamental. This internal grounding projects outward. When your sense of worth is independent of external validation, your energy becomes stable, calm, and attractive. Trying less then becomes a reflection of mastery, not a retreat from engagement. The paradox can be reinforced through incremental challenges. Begin with low-stakes interactions. Let others initiate conversations. Delay responses, intentionally, or reduce visible effort. In minor tasks, observe the outcomes. Then scale the practice into higher-stakes environments, such as professional negotiations, creative collaborations, or important relationships. Each success reinforces confidence in non-striving and strengthens internal calibration. Importantly, feedback loops matter. Reflect after interactions. What worked? Where did effort feel excessive or unnecessary? Where did restraint yield better results? Iterative reflection sharpens self-awareness, owns energy management, and accelerates mastery of the principle. Trying less is a skill, not a one-time adjustment. It requires consistency, mindfulness, and adaptation. Subtle repetition reinforces the lesson. Attraction, influence, and alignment are emergent properties of energy, presence, and measured effort. Overexertion diminishes resonance. Calm, intentional action enhances it. Internal mastery precedes external effect. Less is not weaker. Less is focused, resilient, and magnetic. Finally, remember that this principle is universally applicable. It is not domain-specific. Whether in relationships, work, creative pursuits, or personal growth, trying less creates the conditions for more engagement, more alignment, more influence, more connection. It is not a shortcut or trick, but a disciplined, psychologically informed approach to living and interacting with purpose and integrity. As we prepare to move into the next section, the focus will shift toward advanced strategies for deepening presence, managing high stakes, influence, and sustaining non-striving under pressure. We will explore how to apply these principles in complex social, professional, and personal contexts, creating enduring attraction and alignment without force. Mastery and sustained influence, living the paradox. By now, the foundation is clear. The paradox of trying less to attract more is rooted in presence, energy management, and strategic restraint. But mastery requires more than understanding. It requires sustained integration into life, creating a default mode where influence, connection, and alignment emerge naturally without conscious effort in every instance. This is the level at which subtlety becomes power and restraint becomes magnetism. Advanced mastery begins with energy awareness. Every interaction, action, or decision communicates energy. sometimes more than words ever could. The first step is becoming sensitive to the quality of your own energy, your tone, posture, facial expression, and attention. Are these elements calm, grounded, and intentional, or do they carry urgency, tension, or need? Mastery involves consistently monitoring and adjusting internal energy before external engagement, ensuring that presence precedes action. In parallel, mastery requires environmental awareness. Non-striving does not mean passivity in context. It means reading the dynamics of a situation and aligning your energy with what naturally resonates. For example, in professional meetings, being the loudest voice rarely fosters influence. Those who observe, listen, and contribute with precision often shape outcomes more effectively. In social situations, restraint allows curiosity, initiative, and mutual engagement to emerge organically, making interactions richer and more magnetic. The principle also extends to reputation and visibility. Overexposure often diminishes perceived value. Attempting to be everywhere, doing everything, or responding to every stimulus can reduce impact. Mastery involves selectively engaging where presence has the greatest effect. By curating actions and appearances, deliberately, you create psychological space that enhances value, intrigue, and engagement. Less visible effort often produces greater impact. High-pressure situations reveal the depth of mastery. When stakes are high, the natural tendency is to push harder, control outcomes, and accelerate action. Yet this is precisely when trying less becomes most powerful. Emotional regulation, calm observation, and measured response prevent compulsion from sabotaging influence. They transform pressure into clarity, urgency into purpose, and reactive striving into strategic presence. Mastery emerges in these moments when restraint produces results beyond what frantic effort could achieve. A further dimension is strategic patience. The paradox often clashes with cultural conditioning that equates speed and visible effort with success. Yet, influence and attraction tend to operate on slower rhythms. Opportunities, relationships, and alignment often require incubation. By stepping back, allowing interactions to unfold naturally and reducing unnecessary effort, you align with the intrinsic timing of human attention and engagement. Patience becomes a tool of influence, not a passive waiting. Advanced practitioners also understand the role of consistency. Mastery is cumulative. Occasional restraint yields occasional attraction. Sustained non-striving produces reliable influence. Habits of measured presence, selective engagement, and reflective observation compound over time to creating a personal rhythm that others intuitively respond to. Influence and attention become byproducts of disciplined alignment rather than forced outcomes. Feedback loops remain critical. Reflect on interactions continuously. Where did your energy enhance alignment? Where did compulsion interfere? Which moments of restraint created natural attraction? Mastery is iterative. It is built on attentive observation, reflection, and refinement of energy and action. The paradox is reinforced, not by theory alone, but by repeated, calibrated practice across contexts. Another layer of mastery involves balancing ambition with restraint. Trying less does not mean abandoning goals. It means pursuing objectives with precision rather than force. Focus on what matters most and direct energy toward meaningful impact. Extraneous effort dilutes influence. Concentrated, intentional action amplifies it. Mastery is about quality of effort, not quantity. Less is more because each action carries purpose and resonance. Psychologically, mastery transforms identity. You shift from being a reactive participant in life to a deliberate cultivator of presence and opportunity. Your value is grounded internally, not dependent on immediate feedback. Influence becomes sustainable and attraction becomes authentic. You operate from a place of clarity, self-possession, and ethical alignment rather than compulsion or need. Even in personal growth, trying less enhances results. Overexertion in habits, self-improvement, or social pursuits often leads to burnout. By calibrating effort, prioritizing reflection, and allowing space for natural progression, growth becomes more effective and less draining. You conserve energy, maintain emotional stability, and amplify the impact of every deliberate action. At this level, subtlety becomes the defining characteristic. The paradox operates invisibly. Others may not recognize the restraint, yet they respond to it instinctively. Influence, attention, and alignment emerge naturally not because they are forced, but because your energy communicates competence, stability, and authenticity. You are not visible because of effort. You are magnetic because of presence. Finally, sustainability is central. Mastery is not a temporary tactic, but a way of being. It is maintained through ongoing self-awareness, emotional regulation, deliberate engagement, and reflection. The more consistently you embody non-striving, the more your life aligns with the principle, less effort, produces more attraction, deeper engagement, and authentic influence. The paradox is no longer a strategy, it is a lived reality. As we prepare for the outro, remember, mastery of trying less is both liberation and empowerment. It frees you from compulsive striving, reduces internal tension, and amplifies impact. Influence emerges naturally. Attraction is not forced, but invited. Alignment is sustainable, and the life you cultivate is no longer dictated by external pressures or anxious effort. It is shaped by the calm gravity of presence, intentionality, and ethical influence. Living the paradox, the lasting power of less. As we reach the conclusion of this exploration, it's time to step back and reflect on what the paradox of trying less to attract more truly offers. But this is not a shortcut, a gimmick, or a clever trick to manipulate others. It is a disciplined, psychologically grounded approach to influence, connection, and personal mastery that operates beneath the surface of conscious awareness. Its power lies in subtlety, authenticity, and alignment. Throughout this journey, one principle has remained consistent. The energy behind effort matters more than effort itself. Every interaction, action, and decision communicates information beyond words or visible results. When effort is frantic, compulsive, or anxious, it signals tension, instability, or need. When effort is measured, intentional, and grounded, it signals competence, stability, and intrinsic value. The less you push externally, the more you communicate internally, and in that communication, attraction emerges. Living this paradox requires a fundamental shift in perspective. You move from chasing outcomes to cultivating presence, from pursuing validation to mastering sufficiency, from reacting compulsively to responding deliberately. This shift is not always easy because it often goes against deeply ingrained cultural conditioning that glorifies effort, urgency, and visible hustle. Yet once internalized, it transforms not only your interactions with others, but your relationship with yourself. Consider the subtle transformations that occur when non-striving becomes habitual. Conversations flow more smoothly. Attention is given freely rather than demanded. Opportunities appear without forced pursuit. Collaboration becomes natural rather than coerced. Even moments of tension, whether in work, relationships, or creative endeavors, become opportunities to demonstrate calm mastery rather than reactive energy. Less effort produces more resonance, not by chance, but by design of your inner state. At the heart of this principle lies emotional regulation. Trying less is impossible without it. Restraint, presence, and measured action all depend on your ability to manage internal states. Anxiety, impatience, or fear of scarcity undermine the paradox. Calmness, focus, and self-possession activate it. Emotional mastery becomes both the engine and the fuel for sustainable influence. The less you are pulled by reactive impulses, the more naturally alignment and attraction unfold. Another critical insight is the probabilistic nature of the paradox. Trying less does not guarantee outcomes, control others, or bend circumstances to your will. Instead, it increases the likelihood of authentic engagement, voluntary collaboration, and meaningful connection. It respects the autonomy of others while optimizing the impact of your own presence. Influence, then, is ethical, durable, and aligned with human behavior rather than imposed upon it. Practical integration is essential for lasting impact. Awareness of effort patterns, calibration of actions, and consistent reflection transform theory into habit. Daily life becomes a training ground. Measured responses in conversation, selective engagement in social or professional networks, deliberate pauses before acting, and reflective observation of outcomes. Each instance of restraint reinforces the principle, embedding non-striving as a default mode rather than an occasional strategy. Mastery also requires patience. Our cultural norms push for speed, immediacy, and constant output. The paradox operates on a different rhythm. Alignment, resonance, and attraction often emerge gradually, incubated by presence and patience. By stepping back, creating space, and allowing timing to unfold. Naturally, you align your energy with the intrinsic flow of human attention, perception, and response. Trying less becomes an act of strategic alignment rather than passive waiting. The principle extends beyond relationships and social influence. It applies to work, creativity, and personal growth. Overexertion in any domain often produces fatigue, stress, or diluted results. Measured effort, aligned with presence and intention, enhances quality, resonance, and sustainability. Now, the paradox works across domains. Because it is not about specific tactics, it is about the alignment of energy, action, and awareness. Ethics remains central. Non-striving is not manipulation. It is not coercion. It is a disciplined cultivation of presence and intentionality that respects autonomy while enhancing alignment. The goal is mutual benefit, authentic engagement, voluntary attraction, and sustainable influence. The paradox succeeds not because it exploits weaknesses, but because it leverages clarity, calm, and alignment, the natural dynamics of human perception. Perhaps the most profound transformation is internal. As you practice trying less, you develop sufficiency, composure, and self-possession. You no longer define your value through frantic achievement or constant validation. Influence is a byproduct of presence, not a measurement of effort. Attention is drawn to you without demand, collaboration occurs without coercion, and alignment arises without force. You operate from the calm gravity of mastery rather than the exertion of compulsion. Subtle repetition throughout this audiobook reinforces a singular truth. Less effort, when applied intelligently and ethically, often produces more engagement, attention, and alignment. Measured action communicates competence. Presence communicates authority. Restraint communicates value. And together they create a form of influence that is sustainable, authentic, and ethically grounded. In the final analysis, the paradox of trying less to attract more is both a discipline and a liberation. It frees you from the constant pull of compulsion, reduces internal tension, and amplifies your natural impact. It aligns internal mastery with external influence. It respects the flow of human attention while maximizing resonance. It allows life, relationships, and work to respond to the quiet gravity of presence rather than the frantic push of effort. As you close this audiobook, carry this principle into every interaction, decision, and endeavor. Observe your energy, calibrate effort, cultivate presence, practice restraint, reflect, adjust, and repeat. Over time, you will notice the subtle yet profound changes: attraction that feels effortless, influence that emerges naturally, alignment that occurs without imposition. The paradox is not merely a strategy, it is a mode of being, a pathway to authentic presence, and a framework for living with calm mastery in a world that glorifies constant striving. And as you embody this paradox, remember, the quieter you become in your push, the louder your presence resonates. The less you demand, the more attention flows. The less you force, the more naturally life aligns. Trying less is not a concession. It is the disciplined expression of power, integrity, and authentic influence. It is a principle that, once internalized, reshapes not only how the world perceives you, but also how you experience the world yourself. The paradox is simple, yet its mastery is profound, and the journey is ongoing.